Dead America, Tales from Las Vegas, The Tourists, by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. The horrific events that happened overnight had stretched into the morning and now well into the late afternoon. 6 people sat around the small back area of a coffee shop at the Desert Oasis Casino, waiting for something that they weren't sure was ever going to come. Help. The constant pounding on the door had become white noise over the last few hours. Wet hands slapping against metal, moaning that never stopped, never slowed. The creatures on the other side wanted in, and eventually they'd get their wish. Kyle stared at the door, watching it shake with each impact. In his mid-30s, the Texas oil worker had seen his share of bar fights and rough situations. But nothing like this. His friend Travis sat beside him, equally worn down, their planned Vegas vacation having turned into a nightmare overnight. They'd thought taking a trip with their longtime friend Sarah would be a great way to escape their mundane lives back in rural Texas. They had no idea how right they would be. Sarah sat in the corner with headphones on, the small radio pressed against her ear as she listened for any news, any sign that help might be coming. She'd been at it for hours, occasionally looking up to share what little she'd learned, most of it bad. Across the room, Damon leaned against the wall, his weathered features telling the story of 42 hard years in Alabama. His dream of spending a week amongst the glittering lights of Vegas had turned into this purgatory. He watched the door with tired eyes, occasionally glancing at the others trapped with him. Sitting away from everyone else was Brittany, a 20-something blonde who refused to believe there was any problem she couldn't solve. She hunched over her phone, scrolling through a translation app, typing in messages and waiting for them to process. The signal was weak this deep in the casino, making each translation take forever. The last member of their group sat straight against the wall across from her. Hiroshi had been silent since they had all taken refuge here 12 hours ago. Despite being trapped together for the better part of the day, Brittany was the only one who'd managed to get anything from the man. The proud Japanese man watched her work with the app, his expression unreadable. "Okay, let's see if this works," Brittany muttered, typing carefully into the phone. She'd been trying different languages for the last couple of hours, hoping to find the right one. The app struggled with the poor connection, taking its time to process each attempt. She typed in, "Hello, my name is Brittany. What is yours?" and waited. The loading circle spun endlessly before finally producing something that looked like Japanese characters. Her eyes lit up. "Oh, it looks like we have something." "Finally!" Travis rolled his eyes, not looking away from the door. "Would you give it a rest with that thing? He clearly doesn't want to be bothered." Brittany glared at him. "You don't know that, because we haven't even been able to figure out his name yet." She turned back to Hiroshi and carefully handed him the phone. He stared at the screen for a long moment, reading the characters. Then he looked directly at her, something shifting in his expression. "Hiroshi!" The name came out clear, followed by a stream of Japanese. He stopped abruptly when he realized she couldn't understand, but Brittany's face brightened with excitement nonetheless. "See, his name is Hiroshi. I think I finally found an app that works." Kyle turned from the door, irritation clear in his voice. "Yeah, that's great, Brittany. But if you don't mind, I'd like to focus on the steady drumbeat of death that's trying to break through that door." He motioned to the back room door where the zombies continued their assault. The metal had started to dent inward from the constant impacts. They'd stacked tables and equipment against it, but everyone knew it was just buying time. "You might as well let her try, man," Damon said, pushing off from the wall. "We're all in this together, whether you like it or not." Kyle spun around. "I don't remember asking you a damn thing." Damon's shoulders tensed, his hands balling into fists. For a moment, it looked like he might cross the room, but he caught himself, forcing his body to relax. Getting into it with Kyle wouldn't help anyone. Sarah suddenly sat up straight, pulling off her headset and disconnecting the wireless function. "Hey, that DJ is back on the air, and he's taking calls." She turned up the volume on the small radio, and a smooth voice filled the room. "Welcome to the Midnight Mike Show. Who do I have the pleasure of speaking to?" A panicked, middle-aged man's voice crackled through the speaker, barely audible over background noise. "Hello, I'm Gary. My wife Patty and I need help." "I'm sorry, Gary. There's not a whole lot I can do except give you a platform." "What's going on?" The banging in the background of the call grew louder, accompanied by inhuman moaning that made everyone in the coffee shop exchange worried glances. "We're in one of the penthouse suites at the Desert Oasis Casino, and those people are breaking down the door. We're holding it up as best we can, but I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to do this for." The DJ paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried genuine concern. "Gary, I'm so sorry, buddy. There's not much I can do for you. However, if there are any of my listeners near the penthouse suites at the Desert Oasis Casino, Gary and Patty need your help. Now, Gary, I'm going to put you on hold and wait to see if I get any calls offering to help. Can you hold on for me?" "I'm not going anywhere, Mike." Sarah muted the radio once the call ended. The silence that followed was heavy, everyone processing what they'd just heard. Same casino, same situation, people just like them trying to survive. Brittany shot to her feet, her voice cutting through the quiet. "We have to go help them." Travis let out a harsh laugh. "Are you out of your damn mind, Blondie?" "The name's Brittany, and no, I'm not out of my mind. They need our help." Kyle shook his head. "They need someone's help, but it sure as hell ain't us." "But Travis cut her off, his voice rising. "We barely survived getting into this tiny ass room. Do you really think we're going to go back out there to save someone 20 floors above us? Hell no." Damon cleared his throat. "I don't know. The lady has a point." "Good. You go risk your life then. Let us know how that turns out," Kyle shot back. Sarah raised her hand, and both her friends immediately quieted down. They'd been friends long enough to know not to cross her when she had that look. "Why do you think she has a point?" Damon walked closer to the group, keeping his voice level. "You've been listening to that DJ for hours now. Do you really think someone is coming to save our asses? Hell, we're 3 blocks off the strip because we're broke as hell. If there's a list of people to be saved, we ain't on it. And if we are on it, we're at the very bottom." The truth of his words settled over them like a weight. Every bit of information Sarah had gathered painted the same grim picture. The city was overrun, the military had evacuated, and from all accounts, any emergency services had long since collapsed. Damon continued, gesturing around the small space. "And besides, look around the room here. I see a lot of things, but you know what I don't see? Food." Everyone looked around, taking in their surroundings properly for the first time. Coffee beans in bags, a small pallet of bottled water, which was helpful, but not a single energy bar, sandwich, or anything edible. Without food, it wouldn't be long before they were too weak to fight. Kyle ran his hands through his hair. "Yeah, all right, man, you made your point." "But that don't do us much good," Travis added, "because how in the hell are we supposed to fight against those things?" Damon walked over to the counter where 3 commercial blenders sat. He grabbed the top part of one, unscrewing it from the base. The heavy metal bottom came free, and he gave the power cord a forceful tug, ripping it clean out. He knocked the base against the metal counter, the solid thunk echoing in the room. "You heard that, DJ. A good shot to the head will put them down for the count. I'm pretty sure this will do the trick." He pointed behind the 2 Texas boys where 2 more blenders sat on the prep counter. Kyle and Travis looked at them, then at each other, reluctantly nodding. "Great. 3 guys with blenders," Travis muttered. "This is going to go great." Brittany was already typing into her phone again. "There's 4 men. I'll let Hiroshi know what's going on." Travis and Kyle rolled their eyes, completely dismissing the Japanese man. Brittany ignored them, her fingers flying across the screen as she waited for the translation to process. Even without understanding the words, Hiroshi could tell from everyone's body language that they were preparing to fight. He stood up slowly, stepping forward. Travis grabbed one of the blender bases and waved it dismissively. "We're about to go to war, and you're smaller than Brittany is. Hell, you're smaller than this blender base." He waved the makeshift weapon in Hiroshi's face mockingly. The Japanese man didn't react, just stared straight ahead with calm eyes. "Are you done, Travis?" Brittany snapped. "Yeah, I'm done with this fool." Travis lowered the blender base and started to turn away. Without warning, Hiroshi moved toward a push broom leaning against the wall. He grabbed the handle and began unscrewing it from the base, confusing everyone in the room. Everyone stopped what they were doing to watch. Within moments, he freed the wooden handle from the base, testing its weight and balance. He turned back to face Travis, holding the makeshift staff with obvious expertise. With one hand, he motioned to Travis's blender base. then gestured for him to attack. Travis let out a laugh. "If you want your head bashed in, I can use the practice." "No, Travis, don't!" Brittany's voice pitched high with panic. Hiroshi raised his free hand toward her, palm out in a calming gesture. He caught her eye and gave her a slight wink, just enough to let her know he had this under control. "All right, man, let's do this," Travis said, stepping forward. "I got stuff to do." Travis raised the blender base and marched forward with obvious intent. Hiroshi remained perfectly still, watching, waiting. The moment Travis entered striking distance, everything changed. Hiroshi's staff blurred through the air, the tip driving forward into Travis's wrist. The blender base clattered to the floor as Travis yelped in pain. Before he could recover, 3 more strikes landed on his torso in rapid succession, not hard enough to cause real damage, but forceful enough to drive the message home. Travis stumbled backward, his feet tangling as he tried to retreat. He slipped, going down hard on his backside. His eyes squeezed shut as the wooden tip stopped 2 inches from his nose. Slowly, Travis opened his eyes to find Hiroshi standing over him, the staff held with rock-steady precision. The Japanese man's stern expression cracked, replaced by a wide grin. He pulled the weapon back and extended his hand down to Travis. Travis stared at the offered hand for a moment before accepting it, letting Hiroshi pull him to his feet. Kyle burst out laughing, the sound filling the small room. "Oh man, I like this boy." He walked over and gave Hiroshi a firm pat on the back. The Japanese man's smile faltered slightly, clearly unsure how to respond to the friendly assault, but he forced the expression back and gave a small nod. Travis studied Hiroshi with new respect, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folding knife, flipping it open. The blade caught the fluorescent lights. "Travis, what are you doing?" Brittany asked, alarm creeping back into her voice. Hiroshi's body tensed at the sight of the weapon, but Travis raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Relax, buddy. I'm just trying to make you more dangerous." Travis made a slow gesture toward the staff, and understanding dawned on Hiroshi's face. He handed it over carefully. Travis took the wooden handle and began whittling the tip down to a point, wood shavings curling to the floor. Hiroshi watched intently, nodding his thanks. "It's going to take me a minute," Travis said, working the knife carefully along the wood. "In the meantime, start figuring out just what we're doing." Chapter 2. The group stood around the coffee shop storage room as Travis continued working on the makeshift spear for Hiroshi. The banging on the other side of the door had become background noise over the last few minutes, a constant rhythm of dead fists against metal that no longer made anyone flinch. "So, does anybody know where we are on the floor?" Damon asked, looking around at the others. Kyle glanced up from watching the door. "Pretty sure we're in the coffee shop, dude." Sarah's hand connected with the back of his head before he could duck away. "Oh, really, Kyle? You don't say." The slap made him wince, and he rubbed the spot sheepishly, realizing his mistake. "Sorry, I misunderstood that." "No kidding." Sarah crossed her arms. "Now, do you know where we are, or not?" Kyle thought for a moment, trying to picture the casino floor layout. They'd run through in such a panic earlier, everything had been a blur of slot machines and overturned chairs. "I'm pretty sure there's a stairwell to the left of here." "Are you pretty sure, or are you sure?" Damon pressed, his tone sharp. "Because that is a huge difference since we're going to be running for our lives." Kyle's confidence wavered. He closed his eyes, trying to recall the path they'd taken to get here. The memory was fragmented, broken up by terror and adrenaline. After a moment, he shook his head. "I'm just pretty sure." Damon let out a long sigh and looked around at the others. Sarah shrugged, Brittany shook her head, and Hiroshi simply watched them all, clearly not following the conversation, but alert to the tension in the room. "Brittany, can you ask your new best friend there if he knows where the stairs are?" Brittany nodded eagerly and began typing into the app on her phone. The weak signal made each translation crawl, but finally the Japanese text appeared. She held it up to Hiroshi, who read it carefully. His eyes lit up with understanding, and he motioned for the phone. His fingers moved deliberately across the screen, typing out his response. When he handed it back, Brittany read the translation and smiled. "He says it's definitely to the left, about 40 yards up." Kyle threw up his hands. "See, I was right." Sarah stared at him for a long moment, her expression flat. Kyle tried to hold her gaze, but cracked a smile despite himself, which earned him another eye roll from his friend. Before either could say anything more, Travis let out an impressed whistle. He held up the makeshift spear, examining the point he'd carved. The wood had been whittled down to a sharp tip, the kind that could puncture through soft tissue with enough force behind it. "Not my finest work, but it'll do in a pinch." Travis tossed the weapon across the room to Hiroshi, who caught it smoothly. The Japanese man ran his fingers along the carved point, testing its sharpness, then gave the balance a few experimental tests with practiced movements. After a moment, he gave Travis an appreciative nod. "I'm glad you like it," Travis said. "Just make sure you kick some ass with it." Sarah walked closer to the door, listening to the sounds beyond. The moaning had multiplied since they'd first arrived. "Okay, we know where we're going, but how are we getting through the door? Because it sounds like there's a small army of those people on the other side." Damon surveyed the room, his eyes landing on a heavy metal prep table pushed against the back wall. He walked over and grabbed the edge, testing its weight. Much to his relief, it wasn't bolted down. The table scraped loudly across the floor as he pulled it out. "Help me get this over to the door." Travis and Kyle joined him, and together they slid the heavy table across the floor, positioning it beside the door. The metal legs scraped against the linoleum, making everyone wince at the noise, though it was nothing compared to the constant pounding from outside. Travis studied the door's hinges. "This thing opens towards us. How are we going to do this?" Sarah had already worked out the logistics. Somebody is going to have to pull the door open, and the rest of us are going to have to push it into place before those people get in. Kyle raised his hand quickly. 1, 2, 3, not it. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at Kyle with varying degrees of disbelief and annoyance. Even Hiroshi, who couldn't understand the words, seemed to grasp the childish nature of what had just happened. Kyle's hand slowly lowered under their collective glare. "Fine," he muttered, moving toward the door. "I'll open it up. But you damn well better get that table in place. I'm not about getting bit today." Travis and Damon positioned themselves at the edge of the table, hands planted firmly on the side, muscles already tensing for the push. Brittany stood behind them with her blender base raised, while Sarah gripped hers with white knuckles. Hiroshi held his spear in a ready position, the carved point aimed at the door. "We're going on 3, Kyle said, his voice tight. Damon nodded. "It's your ass, so it's your call." Kyle wrapped his hand around the doorknob, the metal slick with his sweat. He could feel the vibrations through it, each impact from the other side, traveling through the handle into his palm. He took several deep breaths, trying to steady his racing heart. "Okay, 1. His grip tightened. 2. His muscles coiled. 3. Kyle turned the knob and pulled with everything he had. The moment the latch cleared the frame, the door exploded inward under the pressure from outside. A zombie burst through immediately, its momentum carrying it straight at Kyle. Gray skin stretched tight over bones, clothes torn and bloodied, eyes vacant but somehow still hungry. Kyle threw his hands up defensively, catching the creature's chest as it lunged for him. Its fingers clawed at his shoulders, getting a grip on his shirt and pulling him forward. The thing's mouth opened wide, teeth snapping inches from his face, breath that smelled like rotting meat washing over him. Damon and Travis shoved the table with all their strength, sliding it into the doorway just as more zombies appeared. 3 more creatures crashed into the metal surface with enough force to slide it back several inches. Both men threw their full weight against it, boots skidding on the floor as they fought to hold the line. "Somebody help me!" Kyle's voice cracked with panic as the zombie pulled him closer, its strength inhuman for something that should be dead. Hiroshi moved with fluid precision, stepping around Kyle to get a clean angle. He drove the spear forward in one smooth motion, the sharpened tip sliding into the zombie's ear canal with a wet crunch. The wood pushed through, piercing deep into the brain. The creature's grip loosened instantly, going from iron strength to nothing in a heartbeat. It convulsed once, a full-body shudder, then went completely limp. Kyle shoved the corpse away from him, stumbling backward and shaking his hands like he could shake off the feeling of dead flesh. "Son of a bitch," he muttered, giving the fallen zombie a vicious kick. "We need some help over here." Damon's voice strained with effort. The table was sliding backward inch by inch despite their best efforts. 3 more zombies had crowded into the doorway, pushing against the metal barrier with mindless determination. Their faces leaned forward, their mouths opening and closing, moaning with hunger. Hiroshi stepped forward calmly, studying the situation for a split second before acting. He lined up his first strike and drove the spear straight through the closest zombie's eye socket. The creature dropped instantly, its body falling forward onto the table. Without pause, Hiroshi pulled the weapon free and repeated the motion twice more. Each strike was precise, economical, deadly. All 3 corpses now lay draped over the table, creating a gruesome barrier. The room fell quiet, except for their heavy breathing. Damon and Travis slowly straightened up from the table, peering out into the casino beyond. They could hear moaning in the distance, the shuffling of feet on carpet, but couldn't see any immediate threats. Damon turned to the others, keeping his voice low. "Let's move now." He climbed over the table first, careful to minimize noise as he shoved the corpses aside to clear a path. His feet hit the casino floor softly, and he immediately scanned both directions. To the right, the coffee shop opened up completely. The small barrier that usually kept customers in line during business hours stood upright and useless. Beyond it, he could see all the way to the front of the casino. Slot machines blinked mindlessly, their cheerful sounds creating a surreal backdrop to the scattered zombies wandering between them. To the left, through the glass display case that still held yesterday's pastries, he counted at least a dozen zombies milling about. Some stood perfectly still, others swayed slightly, all of them waiting for something to trigger their hunger. Damon looked back and motioned for the others to follow, keeping his voice barely above a whisper. "We're going over the counter and running to the left. There's a whole mess of those people around, but we're going to have to push through them." He pointed at Travis. "You play football?" Travis almost smiled. "I'm from Texas, what do you think?" "Good, because you and I are going to be the fullbacks. We're clearing the row and getting them to the stairwell." The 2 men who'd been at each other's throats just minutes ago now stood as allies. Travis extended his fist, and Damon bumped it without hesitation. "Good, now let's move." Damon and Travis slid over the counter simultaneously, their feet hitting the ground with barely a sound. Both gripped their blender bases tightly, the metal heavy and reassuring in their hands. They scanned the immediate area, muscles coiled and ready. They didn't have to wait long. One of the zombies spotted them almost immediately, its head snapping in their direction with unnatural speed. It let out an excited moan, the sound somewhere between hunger and joy, and sprinted toward them. Damon stepped up to meet it, timing his swing perfectly. He brought the blender base around in a tight arc, catching the creature on the side of its head. The skull cracked audibly, a sound like a watermelon hitting pavement, and the zombie careened to the ground in a heap. The sound of metal against bone echoed through the casino, cutting through the ambient noise of the slot machines. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. Then the moaning started, first 1, then 3, then a dozen voices raised in hungry acknowledgement. They'd been noticed. "We gotta go now." The others scrambled over the counter, Sarah helping Brittany while Kyle hauled himself over. Hiroshi vaulted it gracefully, landing in a crouch with his spear ready. They fell into line behind Damon and Travis, who had already started running toward the stairwell. The 2 men picked up speed, staying shoulder to shoulder to create a wedge formation. Their heavy footfalls on the casino carpet were drowned out by the growing chorus of moans behind them. 40 yards had never seemed so far. The first zombie reached them from the side, coming in fast and low. Damon dropped his shoulder and slammed into it with linebacker force, sending it flying into a bank of slot machines. The next ghoul came at Travis. Rather than try to dodge, he swung his weapon while running, a perfectly timed strike that caught the zombie in the temple. He couldn't tell if it was a kill shot, but the creature spun away and crashed into a poker table. Good enough. 3 more zombies converged on their position from different angles. Damon and Travis came back together, shoulder to shoulder, and ducked low in unison. They caught the 2 lead zombies in the gut, their momentum lifting the creatures off the ground. Using them as a battering ram, they plowed through the next group, clearing a path for the others. The men grunted under the weight, their legs burning as they pushed forward. The zombies they carried thrashed and snapped, trying to bite, but couldn't get the right angle. Finally, with the stairwell door in sight just 10 yards ahead, they heaved the creatures aside and sprinted the final distance. Travis reached the door first, yanking it open and diving through. Damon planted himself beside the doorway, like a linebacker guarding the goal line, waving the others through. "Get inside! Get inside!" Sarah flew through first, then Brittany, then Kyle. Hiroshi came last, moving backward to cover their retreat with his spear. The pursuing zombies were closing fast, their footfalls mixing with their excited moans. Damon rushed inside and grabbed the release bar, pulling with all his strength to close the door. But before he could shut it completely, a zombie reached them, jamming its arm and leg through the gap. The door stuck open about 8 inches, the creature's limbs preventing it from closing. More zombies piled up behind the first, adding their weight to the assault. Damon gripped the release bar with both hands, pulling with everything he had. His boots slid on the smooth stairwell floor as he fought to keep the door from opening wider. The zombie's arm reached through, grasping at air, fingers opening and closing mechanically. "Come on, man!" Travis moved to help. "Get up the stairs!" Damon's voice strained with effort. Before Travis could respond, new sounds echoed down from above, moaning, excited footsteps, the slap of dead feet on concrete stairs, getting closer. Kyle looked up the stairwell, his face going pale. "Oh my God!" Chapter 3. Damon continued struggling to hold the door closed as the zombies on the other side tried to pull it open. The metal handle bit into his palms, his muscles screaming from the strain. More hands appeared in the gap, dead fingers wrapping around the edge of the door, pulling with inhuman strength. Hiroshi noticed the situation deteriorating and darted back to the opening. He raised his makeshift spear, studying the writhing mass of limbs for a clean target. When one of the creatures turned its head to push through, he delivered a forceful strike straight through its eye. The ghoul convulsed violently, its body going rigid before falling completely limp. Its arm and leg remained wedged in the space between the door and frame, creating a partial barrier, but it was one less zombie trying to get inside. As Hiroshi lined up his next shot, Travis yelled out from the base of the stairs, "We have to move now!" Travis looked up the stairwell as the sound of rampaging footsteps and moaning descended toward them. The concrete amplified every footfall, creating an echo chamber of approaching death. The only saving grace was that the sounds appeared to be several floors above them, giving the group precious seconds. "Start running up those stairs!" Damon grunted through clenched teeth. "The rooms start on the 5th floor," Sarah yelled out. Kyle and Travis didn't need to be told twice. They began moving immediately, leading Sarah and Brittany up the stairs. Their footsteps pounded on the concrete as they took the steps 2 at a time. Hiroshi stayed behind with Damon, using his spear to take down another zombie through the opening. The weapon made a wet sound as it found its mark. "Get moving, man. You're just going to be in my way." Damon looked straight at Hiroshi, making direct eye contact. Despite the language barrier, the Japanese man understood perfectly when Damon motioned forcefully toward the stairs. With one more precise strike through the door to drop another creature, Hiroshi turned and ran after the others. Damon continued to strain against the door as more zombies joined the group on the other side. Through the gap, he could see the mass of bodies piling up, each one pushing forward mindlessly. Half a dozen hands wrapped around the edge of the door, their combined strength slowly overwhelming his. "Come on, guys, where are we going?" he muttered to himself, sweat running down his face. The universe seemed to deliver his message. Kyle's voice echoed down from above. "We're on the 4th floor." Damon muttered a string of curses as he prepared to make his break. He shifted his weight, turning one foot toward the stairs while maintaining his grip on the door. With a deep breath, he pulled the door toward him with every ounce of strength he had left. With a motivational yell, he let go. The sudden change in momentum caught the zombies off guard. The door swung back violently toward the zombies. The counterweight he'd been providing suddenly gone. Several creatures tumbled backward into each other, creating a writhing pile of limbs at the doorway. Bodies crashed into bodies, creating exactly the logjam Damon needed. He didn't waste the opportunity. His legs pumped hard as he raced up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. The metal railing blurred past as he climbed. Within seconds he reached the first landing, A quick glance back showed the first zombie finally untangling itself from the pile and coming through the opening. It wasn't alone. 3 more were already pushing past it, and he could see dozens more beyond. Damon continued pumping his legs hard, his lungs burning as he raced up the stairs. The sounds of moaning and dead footfalls followed him, growing closer with each second. The noise from above wasn't any better. It sounded like a mob was just around the corner, descending fast. 2nd floor landing, 3rd floor landing. His thighs burned, but he couldn't slow down. The zombies didn't tire, didn't feel pain, didn't need to catch their breath. As Damon reached the 4th floor landing, he saw Travis and Kyle standing at the base of the ascending stairs, their hands firmly grasping 2 creatures, having managed to spin them around to use as shields. They held the creatures backward, using them to hold back 6 more that were coming at them from above. The zombies they held thrashed and snapped, but couldn't turn around to bite. "We gotta get through the door!" Brittany reacted swiftly, lunging for the door handle and pulling it open just as Damon reached it. The big man raced through the opening, his momentum carrying him forward. He was greeted by the outstretched arms of a zombie that had been standing just inside. Their legs tangled together in the collision, sending them both crashing to the hallway floor. His makeshift weapon, the heavy blender base, clattered away across the carpet. The zombie landed on top of him, its weight pressing down as it snapped at his face. Damon managed to get his hand around the creature's throat, holding it back. The thing was smaller than him, maybe 140 pounds when it had been alive, but it fought with supernatural strength. Using his size advantage, Damon pressed upward, propelling himself back to his feet while maintaining his grip on the creature's throat. Its feet kicked uselessly in the air as he lifted it completely off the ground. The railing was just a few yards to his left, overlooking the central atrium of the casino. With a forceful grunt, he carried the thrashing zombie over and shoved it over the edge. The creature fell silently, arms still reaching until it hit the 1st floor below with a wet crunch. Hiroshi darted through the door next, his bloodied spear held at the ready. While there weren't any zombies within immediate striking distance, he could see 3 running toward them from down the hallway, maybe 30 yards away and closing fast. "Jesus Christ, they're everywhere," Sarah said, her voice tight with fear. Damon turned from the railing. "Get behind us and tell those boys of yours to get in here." Sarah did as instructed, turning back to the stairwell door and yelling through the opening. "Travis, Kyle, get your asses in here." Damon darted over to where his weapon had fallen, scooping up the blender base before getting shoulder to shoulder with Hiroshi. The 2 men exchanged a brief nod, then raced forward to meet the threat head-on. Hiroshi moved to the right, splitting away from Damon to divide the creature's attention. His plan worked perfectly. 2 zombies veered toward him, while the 3rd continued straight at Damon. Hiroshi planted his feet firmly, raising his spear and aiming for a lethal blow as soon as the first ghoul came within reach. The creature ran straight onto the weapon, the tip piercing through its eye socket. But rather than letting it drop to the ground, Hiroshi held it up, shoving the impaled zombie backward into the 2nd one. While it wasn't enough to knock the 2nd creature down, the collision sent it stumbling off course. Hiroshi yanked his weapon free with a practiced twist and lined up another strike. The ghoul barely had time to turn back toward him before the spear tip drove straight into its ear canal, penetrating deep into the brain. Meanwhile, Damon met his attacker with raw force, swinging the blender base in a tight arc that connected with the zombie's temple. The impact sent it spinning into the wall, where it crumpled and didn't get back up. Hiroshi yanked his weapon free, blood and other fluids dripping from the carved point. Then Brittany's voice cut through the moment of victory, panic clear in every word. "Down the hall!" Hiroshi glanced back, not understanding her words, but fully grasping the terror in her tone. She was pointing frantically past him. He turned to see what had frightened her. 24 creatures were running toward them from the far end of the hallway, their footsteps creating a thunderous rumble on the hotel carpet. "The gift shop!" Sarah ran forward, pointing to a casino gift shop just a few yards ahead. The security gate was still up, the store dark but accessible. Hiroshi and the 2 women began running for it immediately. Damon paused, looking back toward the stairwell door. Kyle emerged first, stumbling through and immediately turning to help Travis. His friend was right behind him, trying to pull the door closed, but the zombies were too fast. Dead hands grabbed the edge, holding it open as more creatures pushed through. The two Texans ran hard, sprinting down the hallway toward the others. Kyle was naturally faster, pulling ahead by a couple of steps. That small gap saved him. The closest zombie, a woman in a torn cocktail dress, reached Travis first. Her hand caught his ankle mid-stride. Travis stumbled, arms windmilling as he tried to keep his feet under him. He couldn't recover. His body pitched forward, and he face-planted hard on the carpet. "No!" Travis screamed as he tried to scramble forward on his hands and knees. The cocktail-dressed zombie pounced onto his back immediately. Her teeth found his shoulder, tearing through his shirt and into the meat beneath. Travis let out a scream of pure agony as blood began soaking through the fabric. Kyle stopped dead in his tracks, spinning around. His friend was only 10 feet away. "Travis!" More zombies reached Travis in seconds. 3, then 5, then too many to count. They fell on him like a pack of wild animals, each one biting, tearing, claiming their piece. Travis's screams turned to gurgles, then stopped entirely. Damon let out a loud 2-finger whistle that cut through the chaos. The sharp sounds snapped Kyle out of his shock, jolting him back to reality. Self-preservation took over. He turned away from his dying friend, knowing there was nothing he could do. Kyle and Damon ran hard toward the gift shop. Behind them, the swarm of zombies from both directions was converging. Those not feeding on Travis locked onto the fleeing survivors. They made the turn into the store, spotting Brittany waving frantically from the back. "There's a hallway back here! Come on!" The two men tore through the store, sending postcards and plastic dice flying as they knocked over display racks. Miniature snow globes shattered on the floor. Halfway to the back, they heard the first zombies reaching the entrance, their moans echoing off the shop walls. Merchandise went flying as the ghouls rushed through, completely focused on their prey. A rack of t-shirts went down, keychains scattered across the floor. Kyle and Damon reached the checkout counter at the back and jumped up, sliding across its surface. They burst through the curtain, separating the main store from the stockroom. Brittany led them through the collection of boxes and inventory to a back door. The stockroom was cramped, narrow, forcing them to go single file. They followed her through the door, where Hiroshi and Sarah were waiting in a service hallway. As soon as they were through, Hiroshi pulled the door shut, sealing them away from the zombies still in pursuit. The door was solid metal with no window, cutting off the sounds of destruction from the gift shop. Damon and Kyle bent over, hands on their knees, struggling to catch their breath in the hallway. The space stretched on for 50 yards, fluorescent lights humming overhead. They were alone for the moment, but they could hear muffled moaning coming from the other side of the door. The zombies were still there, still hunting. Sarah looked at the two men, her face already showing the first signs of panic. Her eyes darted between them, searching. "Where's Travis?" Kyle and Damon exchanged a glance, neither wanting to be the one to tell her. The silence stretched on too long. Sarah's breathing quickened as tears began to flow. "Where's Travis? Please, where's Travis?" Chapter 4. The group stood in the hallway, silent except for Sarah's sobbing and the sound of moaning coming from the other side of the door. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everyone look haggard and worn. Brittany put her hand on the devastated woman's back, rubbing small circles, trying to offer what comfort she could. Kyle stared at the floor, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. The image of Travis falling, the zombies piling on top of him, played over and over in his mind. His friend's scream echoed in his ears. "I should have gone back for him. Maybe I could have." Kyle trailed off, the words dying in his throat. What could he have done? Gotten himself killed too? The anger that had been simmering suddenly boiled over, and he turned to Damon, raising his voice. "This is your fault. You're the one who said we had to come out here. We were safe in that room. We were..." Kyle's words died as Damon stared at him. The big man didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at him with those tired eyes. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Kyle's shoulders sagged as reality crashed back down. He knew the truth. They all did. Staying in that coffee shop would have been a death sentence. No food, zombies at the door, nowhere to go. But knowing that didn't make Travis any less dead. After a few moments, Damon reached out and firmly grabbed the Texan's shoulder, giving it a squeeze. The gesture was simple, but meaningful. There was nothing you could have done. He was gone the moment he hit the floor. Kyle nodded, swallowing hard. He knew Damon was right. Those things had been on Travis in seconds. Even if he'd tried to help, he would have just joined his friend as zombie food. Brittany continued consoling Sarah as she spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. I know I didn't know Travis like the two of you did, but I'd like to think that the best way to honor him would be to get up to that penthouse and help those people out. Sarah's sobs quieted for a moment. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand before forcing out some words, her voice thick with grief and bitter humor. The best way to honor Travis would be to down a fifth of whiskey and set something on fire. Kyle let out a surprised laugh, the sound bursting from him before he could stop it. The pain was still there, but the memory of Travis made him smile through it. Shooting something would also be acceptable. The two of them broke into laughter, the sound slightly hysterical, but genuine. Years of friendship, of Travis's particular brand of chaos, flooded their minds. The time he'd tried to deep fry a turkey in his apartment, the night he'd convinced them to steal a shopping cart and race it down a hill. All the stupid, dangerous, wonderful things that made Travis who he was. Brittany and Damon exchanged a confused look, not understanding the inside jokes, but recognizing grief when they saw it. Hiroshi stood with his back against the wall, keeping watch down the hallway, making sure it stayed empty. He didn't understand the words, but he understood loss. The way Sarah's shoulders shook, the way Kyle's laughter had tears behind it. After a few moments, Kyle and Sarah calmed down. They stepped toward each other and embraced, holding tight like they might lose each other too if they let go. You have to know, I would have saved him if I could. Sarah nodded against his shoulder. I know you would have, I know. Finally they broke the embrace, stepping back and wiping away their tears. Sarah took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. Travis was gone, but they were still here. They had to keep moving. Kyle cleared his throat, getting back to business. Okay, obviously we can't stay here. So, what the hell do we do? Damon looked down the hallway, considering their options. First things first, let's see where this hallway goes. Kyle nodded as the group fell into line behind Damon. The big man led them down the corridor, their footsteps muffled on the thin carpet. There were doors on either side, spaced every 10 feet or so. Damon tried each handle as they passed. Locked, locked, locked. Each time a doorknob refused to budge, the tension in the group ratcheted up another notch. Their options were shrinking with every locked door. The fear began to creep in that the door they'd come through might be the only one that would open, trapping them in this fluorescent-lit purgatory. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, but after 50 yards, they reached the end. One final door stood before them, a plain metal door with no window, no sign, no indication of what lay beyond. Damon hesitated, his hand hovering over the handle. He took a deep breath, offering up a silent prayer to whatever might be listening. His fingers wrapped around the cold metal and turned. The handle moved. Oh, thank God. Relief washed over his face. Damon looked back to the others, giving them a nod before gently pushing the door open. He moved it just 6 inches, enough to peer through, but not enough to allow a creature to gain a handhold on it. He pressed his face to the gap, scanning what he could see. An open area stretched out before them, some kind of lobby or common area. To the left, he could make out a seating area with leather chairs and small tables. Straight ahead, maybe 20 yards away, stood a bank of elevators, their brass doors reflecting the overhead lights. Movement caught his eye. A zombie walked right past the opening, so close he could have reached out and touched it. The creature's torn business suit was stained with blood, its jaw hanging at an unnatural angle. Damon pulled the door closed quickly but carefully, wincing as it made a soft thud against the frame. The group held their collective breath. 1 second, 5 seconds, 10. No moaning, no pounding, no indication they'd been noticed. That was almost bad. Sarah kept her voice low. What did you see out there? Not much. There are a dozen or so of those things out there, and there are some chairs to the left. What about stairs? Kyle asked hopefully. Damon shook his head. If there are, I didn't see any. The only thing I saw were the elevators. Kyle's face twisted in disgust. Oh, that's a hell no from me. Yeah, I'm not that fond of that idea either. Being trapped in a small space with one exit. If we get off on the wrong floor, we're a box lunch for those things. Brittany pulled out her phone, typing quickly to translate the situation for Hiroshi. The Japanese man read the screen intently, his brow furrowing in concentration. Then his expression changed. An idea sparked in his eyes. He grabbed the phone from Brittany and began typing furiously, his fingers flying over the screen. "What's he saying?" Kyle asked, trying to see over Brittany's shoulder. Brittany held up her hand for patience, trying to read over Hiroshi's shoulder as he typed. After a moment, he handed the phone back, and she read the translation aloud. "Okay, he says that we need to take the elevator." Before she could finish, both Damon and Kyle were already protesting, shaking their heads vigorously. "Oh, hell no, that's not happening," Kyle said. "Did you not tell him about the box lunch?" Damon added. "I didn't, but let me finish. He says that nobody is going to use it, which is why we should." Damon's face scrunched in confusion. "That doesn't make any damn sense." "Yeah, nobody's going to use it because they're smart enough to know it's a death trap," Kyle said. "Tell him that if those things are on the other side of the doors when they open, we'd be sitting ducks." Brittany typed out the concern, showing the phone to Hiroshi. He read it and immediately began shaking his head. Without warning, he gently pushed past her and stepped up to Damon and Kyle. He put his hand on Damon's shoulder, guiding him into position beside Kyle. "What in the world are you doing, man?" Hiroshi didn't understand the words, but the confused tone was universal. He held up his hand in a calming gesture, trying to communicate that they should give him a moment. Damon caught on, giving him a nod. "All right, man, make your point." Hiroshi held up his wooden spear, examining it for a moment before turning it sideways. He placed it horizontally against both men's chests, the wood pressing against their shirts. He adjusted his stance, getting into a slightly crouched position with one leg behind him for stability. His muscles tensed as he applied steady pressure with the wood. With his free hand, Hiroshi motioned for the two men to try walking forward. They exchanged confused looks but shrugged and attempted to step forward. They couldn't move. Despite Hiroshi being significantly smaller than either of them, the leverage from the spear and his stance held them completely in place. They pushed harder, really trying now, but Hiroshi grunted and strained and held his ground. His feet didn't slide. His arms didn't buckle. After a few seconds of this demonstration, the men stopped pushing. Hiroshi relaxed and stood straight up, a slight smile on his face. He tapped their makeshift weapons with the end of his spear, then made exaggerated bludgeoning motions, mimicking how they'd been fighting the zombies. Understanding began to dawn on their faces. In the elevator, Hiroshi could hold the doorway with his spear while they attacked anything that tried to get through. It would create a bottleneck, limiting how many zombies could attack at once. Kyle still looked skeptical. "I still don't like it. But I think it could work," Damon said slowly. "I think it could too, but I still don't like it." "Do you have a better idea?" Kyle hemmed and hawed, looking around the hallway as if an alternative might magically appear. After a moment, he shook his head in defeat. "Damn it. That's what I thought." Sarah stepped forward, raising her hand to get everyone's attention. Her eyes were still red from crying, but her voice was steady. "Just so I'm clear on the plan, we're going to run into an elevator and rely on a man who weighs less than I do to hold a bunch of those people at bay with a broomstick." Brittany tilted her head, considering. "Pretty much, yeah." Sarah let out a long sigh, shaking her head in disbelief. She looked at each of them in turn, these strangers she was trusting with her life. "You boys are out of your damn mind. If you don't want to make the run with us, we can leave you here and come back for you later," Kyle offered. And Sarah looked around the hallway, taking in the locked doors, the hard floor, the concrete walls, nothing but a tomb to wait in while the others either succeeded or died trying. At least in the elevator, she'd know quickly which way it went. "At least if we die in the elevator, it'll be quick," which sounds better than sitting here and wasting away. She muttered curses under her breath, some directed at the situation, some at Travis for dying and leaving her with these idiots, some at herself for going along with this insane plan. But finally, reluctantly, she nodded. "Okay, fine, let's do it." Chapter 5. The group stood ready at the hallway door, muscles tense with anticipation. Hiroshi's hand rested on the knob as everyone lined up behind him. Damon took point, his massive frame coiled and ready to plow through anything waiting on the other side. Behind him, Sarah shifted nervously from foot to foot. Brittany gripped her blender base with white knuckles, and Kyle brought up the rear, his own makeshift weapon raised. "Sarah, when we get to the elevator, you hit the button and let us know which one dings. Kyle and I will cover us," Damon said, his voice low and steady. Sarah nodded, wiping her sweaty palms on her jeans. "I'll take care of it, Damon." Kyle took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "All right, let's do this before I think about it too much and change my mind." Damon looked down to Hiroshi and gave him a firm nod. The Japanese man held up 5 fingers, his eyes locked on Damon's. 4 fingers, 3, 2, 1. As his hand closed into a fist, he turned the knob and yanked the door open. Damon exploded through the doorway, his eyes immediately locking onto a zombie just a few yards ahead on his left. The creature stood with its back to them, swaying slightly, unaware of their presence. Damon raised the heavy metal blender bottom high above his head and brought it down with crushing force onto the top of the creature's skull. The strike connected with a sickening crack, the skull caving in under the impact. The zombie collapsed into a heap on the floor, dark blood pooling beneath its ruined head. The sound of metal on bone echoed throughout the empty space, bouncing off the walls and drawing the attention of every zombie in the area. Heads turned in unison, dead eyes focused. Moans rose from a dozen throats. The 3 members of the group behind Damon spread out instinctively, putting several yards between each other. The tactical move served its purpose, pulling the approaching zombies in multiple directions, dividing their focus. The ghouls reached out with grasping fingers as the women darted past, their hands closing on nothing but air. The creatures immediately changed direction, pursuing their prey with single-minded hunger. Kyle saw the zombies chasing Sarah and Brittany and adjusted his course, cutting back across the open space toward them. He lowered his shoulder and slammed into the closest pursuer. The impact sent the creature tumbling to the ground, its limbs flailing wildly. The commotion drew the attention of another zombie, which spun around and rushed at Kyle with inhuman speed. Before it could reach him, Damon came charging in from the side. He swung his weapon in a wide arc, the blender base connecting with the back of the ghoul's head. The force of the blow sent it crashing down on top of the first fallen creature, creating a tangle of dead limbs. "Keep moving!" The 2 men didn't waste time finishing off the downed zombies. They raced to catch up with the women, who had already reached the elevator bank. Sarah's finger jabbed at the call button repeatedly, as if the frequency of her pressing could somehow make the elevator arrive faster. The button glowed beneath her assault. A moment later, Damon and Kyle reached them, immediately spinning around to form a protective barrier. 2 more zombies were closing in fast, their dead sprint closing the distance. Both men stepped forward to meet the threat, timing their swings perfectly. The blender bases connected with the zombies' faces simultaneously. The impacts were brutal, sending both creatures tumbling backward. They hit the ground hard, but immediately began trying to get back up, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. The men didn't give them the chance. They moved in quickly, raising their weapons and bringing them down again and again until they heard the telltale crack of fractured skulls. Damon looked up from the carnage, scanning for more threats. Instead of zombies, he spotted Hiroshi still in the middle of the open area. 3 creatures were converging on him from different angles, moving fast. Damon's first instinct was to run and help, but before he could take a step, the Japanese man went to work. Rather than use the sharp end of his spear, Hiroshi spun the weapon around with practiced ease. He stepped to the side at the last second, using the blunt end like a staff. The first zombie ran straight into the wooden handle at knee height, its legs tangling as it went down hard. Without pausing, Hiroshi pivoted and swept the legs of the second creature, sending it crashing into a decorative plant stand. The third zombie tried to adjust its approach, but Hiroshi was already moving. He brought the staff around in a low sweep that caught both its ankles. The creature went airborne for a moment before landing flat on its back. When it immediately tried to sit up, Hiroshi delivered a precise kick to its face that sent it sprawling back down. The elevator dinged. Sarah's eyes snapped to the indicator lights above the doors. "It's the one on the right." Damon rushed to position himself in front of the elevator, gently but firmly pushing the women back. He kept his weapon raised, ready for whatever might be inside. The mechanical sounds of the elevator car locking into place seemed to take forever. Finally, the doors began their slow slide open. His eyes went wide. 4 zombies stood inside the car, their backs to the opening doors. Jesus Christ! The ghouls seemed confused by the sudden movement behind them. They began to turn, their movements sluggish and uncoordinated. Damon didn't wait for them to fully face him. He lunged forward, grabbing the nearest creature by its torn dress shirt and yanking it out into the open. Kyle! Kyle reacted instantly, stepping up and bringing his weapon down on the extracted zombie's head. The skull cracked like an egg, and the creature dropped. Meanwhile, Damon had already rushed into the elevator car. He planted his shoulder into the back of the next zombie, using his considerable weight to drive it forward into the other 2, trapped in the corner. He kept the pressure up, his legs straining as he held all 3 ghouls pinned against the elevator wall. They thrashed wildly, their bloody hands slapping at his head and arms, trying to find purchase. Fingernails scraped across his scalp, dead fingers tangled in his hair. But they couldn't get the grip they needed to pull him in for a bite. "Hiroshi, we're leaving." Brittany's voice carried across the lobby. Hiroshi heard the urgency and spun around to see the elevator doors open, everyone piling inside. He broke into a full sprint, his legs pumping hard as he raced across the open space. Behind him, he could hear the zombies he'd knocked down scrambling back to their feet. The elevator doors began their slow slide closed. Brittany instinctively reached out to hold them open, but Hiroshi shook his head sharply, waving her back. She pulled her hand away just as he glanced over his shoulder. The zombies were gaining on him, their tireless dead sprint closing the distance. He pushed himself harder, his lungs burning. The doors were halfway closed now. 10 feet. 5 feet. At the last possible second, Hiroshi leaped through the air, turning his body sideways to fit through the narrowing gap. He crashed into Damon's back, the impact helping the big man maintain his position against the pinned zombies. Kyle's fingers stabbed at the close button repeatedly, willing the doors to shut faster. Through the narrowing gap, he could see the pursuing zombies getting closer. 20 feet, 10 feet, 5. The doors sealed shut with a soft thump just as the first zombie reached them. The creature's fists immediately began pounding on the metal, joined seconds later by others. Kyle quickly hit the first button his fingers found, the 10th floor. It wasn't their intended destination. The penthouse was on 20, but it was a floor that wasn't this one, which was good enough for the moment. The elevator began to rise, but the situation inside was far from resolved. "I need some help here." Damon's voice strained with effort. The 3 pinned zombies were pushing back harder now, their combined strength beginning to overwhelm him. His feet started sliding backward on the elevator's polished floor. Kyle reached out, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her away from the chaos. Brittany pressed herself against the far wall. Before Kyle could move in to help, Hiroshi stepped forward. He shifted his grip on the spear, raising it to shoulder height. With surgical precision, he drove the sharpened point through the temple of the nearest zombie. Blood sprayed across Damon's face and chest. "Shit!" Damon cursed but held his position. Hiroshi pulled the weapon free with a wet sound, immediately lining up his next strike. The second zombie took the spear through its eye socket, the third through the soft spot just behind its ear. Each strike was delivered with mechanical efficiency, no wasted movement, no hesitation. Within seconds, all 3 zombies were still. Damon felt the pressure against him cease as the creatures went limp. He stepped back slowly, making sure they were truly dead before releasing them. The bodies slumped to the floor in a heap, blood pooling beneath them. "Thank you, man." Damon nodded to Hiroshi, who returned the gesture. The elevator car fell silent except for their heavy breathing and the soft ding of the indicator light counting up through the floors. 4, 5, 6. "Damn it, we're stopping soon," Kyle said, noticing they were slowing. Brittany immediately grabbed Hiroshi's arm, pulling him toward the front of the elevator. She pointed at the doors and made a barrier gesture with her hands, reminding him of the technique he'd demonstrated earlier. He understood immediately and got into position. 8, 9. The elevator slowed further. Hiroshi planted his feet in a wide stance, holding the wooden spear horizontally across where the doors would open. his muscles tensed, ready to hold back whatever might be waiting. Damon and Kyle moved to either side of him, their weapons raised, ready to strike anything that tried to push through. The elevator settled into place with a soft bump. The final ding faded into silence. They held their collective breath as the doors slid open. Nothing. An empty hallway stretched out before them, brightly lit as if nothing out of the ordinary was happening. No zombies, no sounds, no movement. Hiroshi held up his hand, signaling for everyone to stay put. He stepped cautiously out into the hallway, his spear ready. He looked left, then right, scanning for any sign of danger. After a moment, he retreated back into the elevator and gave them a thumbs up. "Well, that sucked 6 ways from Sunday," Kyle said, finally allowing himself to breathe normally. Damon wiped blood from his face with his sleeve. "Yeah, but we made it. Now we just have to figure out where we're going next." Chapter 6. The group sat in the elevator car, blood pooling beneath the dead zombies at their feet. Kyle hit the door open button, then waited a few seconds before hitting close again. They needed to catch their breath, but they couldn't let the door stay open too long, or the alarm would sound, potentially drawing more creatures. The doors slid shut with a soft whisper. Everyone took the moment to breathe, to process what they'd just survived. 10 seconds passed before Kyle hit the open button again. "Okay, this is the last cycle. We have to keep moving." Sarah leaned against the elevator wall, exhaustion clear in every line of her body. "Are you sure we can't find a room on this floor? Maybe hit the minibar and have a shower and a nap?" "There will be plenty of time for that once we help those people up on 20, Damon said. Sarah let out a defeated sigh. She knew the big man was right, even if it wasn't what she wanted to hear. Her friend was dead, she was covered in blood that wasn't hers, and all she wanted was 5 minutes to process everything. But 5 minutes could mean life or death for Gary and Patty. Once the doors closed again, Kyle reached over to hit 20 on the keypad. The button lit up for a brief moment, a promising glow, before going dark. He pressed it again. Same result. The elevator didn't move. "What's going on, man?" "The damn thing is broken. I hit 20, but it wouldn't register." Damon, Sarah, and Brittany crowded around the panel, watching Kyle demonstrate the problem. Each time he pressed the button for the 20th floor, it would illuminate briefly, then cut off, like the elevator was rejecting the command. "See, it's broken." Kyle. Brittany trailed off, her finger pointing to a small placard beside the buttons. Everyone leaned in to read the neat black text on brass. "Please use room key to access amenities and penthouse suites on floors 17 through 20. "Son of a bitch, we're going through all this and can't even get up to 20? Kyle thought for a moment, his mind racing through options. They'd come too far to be stopped by something as simple as a key card reader. He reached down and hit the button for 16. This time the light stayed on, glowing steadily. "What are you doing?" "Getting us as close as we can get." The doors began their slow slide shut. Everyone tensed as the elevator lurched into motion, beginning its ascent. Hiroshi stepped to the front of the car without being asked, raising his spear to chest height across the opening. He kept his stance loose and ready as they passed 11, 12, 13. At 14, his muscles began to tense. At 15, he shifted into his defensive stance. Damon and Kyle moved to either side of him, weapons raised. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 16th floor. Even before the doors began to open, they could hear it, moaning. Multiple voices, hungry and eager. "Hit them hard!" The doors parted to reveal 4 zombies pressed against the opening, trying to push their way in simultaneously. Their bodies created a bottleneck, each one preventing the others from entering effectively. Before Hiroshi had to struggle against their combined weight, Damon and Kyle struck. Their blender bases connected with skulls in quick succession. 2 ghouls dropped immediately, collapsing in the elevator opening. Hiroshi grunted as he held the spear in place, moving his head from side to side to avoid the grasping hands reaching over and around his barrier. One creature managed to grab his wrist, pulling his arm toward its mouth. Kyle reacted instantly, bringing his weapon around in a tight arc. The blender base crashed into the zombie's jaw, shattering teeth in an explosion of enamel and black blood. The creature stumbled back, its ruined mouth hanging open. It regained its footing quickly, the damage to its face not slowing it down at all. The ghoul sprinted back toward the defensive line. Kyle was ready this time, bringing his weapon down on top of its head with enough force to crack the skull. As it dropped, Damon finished off the last zombie with a similar strike. The 5 of them held their positions in the elevator car, weapons raised, breathing hard. They waited for the sound of more footsteps, more moaning, but heard nothing. The hallway beyond seemed empty. Still, they didn't move until the doors began to close on their own. Even then, they maintained their defensive stance until silence settled over them completely. "I think we're good, man." Kyle glanced down at Hiroshi, who hadn't moved from his position. The Japanese man's eyes remained focused on the door, his spear still held ready. After a moment, he gave Kyle a small nod. Kyle hit the open button. The doors parted to reveal an empty hallway. No movement, no sounds. Only then did Hiroshi relax, lowering his weapon and stepping out carefully. He looked both ways down the corridor, checking doorways and alcoves. After confirming it was clear, he gave the others a subtle head nod. The group cautiously stepped into the hallway. Hotel carpet muffled their footsteps. Generic artwork lined the walls between numbered doors, everything looking exactly like every other floor they'd seen. 4 more floors to go. Anybody have any ideas? Brittany's face lit up with inspiration. "Maybe you could climb up the elevator shaft. There's gotta be a ladder in there, right?" Damon and Kyle turned to her with identical expressions of disbelief. Their glares said everything that needed to be said about that suggestion. "Well, I mean, it works in the movies." "What about the stairs?" Sarah suggested. Damon shook his head. "If the elevator was locked out for the top 4 floors, we have to assume that the door is going to be locked up tight too. Plus, the last stairwell wasn't exactly the friendliest of places," Brittany added, suppressing a shudder at the memory. Kyle's expression suddenly changed, excitement flickering in his eyes. "The stairwell can work. But how, man? The door is probably locked. I just need a screwdriver or a knife or something, and I can get it open." Damon crossed his arms, skeptical. "Not that I'm calling you a liar, but before I risk my ass in another stairwell, I'd really like to know how." "Yeah, that's fair enough." Kyle rubbed the back of his neck. "A few years back, I worked at this shitty roadside motel. I would hit the stairwell for a smoke break when the weather wasn't cooperating." "Which in rural Texas is pretty often," Sarah interjected. "Right, well, every now and then the door would shut and it would get stuck. So I learned pretty quick how to jimmy it open." "And you think it's going to work on a Vegas casino door?" Kyle gestured around them at the worn carpet, the flickering light at the end of the hall, the general air of neglect. "Look around, man. We're 3 blocks off the strip in a hotel that was run down the day it was opened. I know I can get it open." Damon considered this for a long moment before nodding. "All right, I believe you. Now, we just need to find something I can open it with." Before they could begin searching, they heard the distinctive click of a deadbolt turning. Everyone tensed, weapons rising, a door cracked open, and a middle-aged man poked his head out. He looked at them with suspicion, taking in their blood-stained clothes and makeshift weapons. Then his face broke into a relieved smile. "Oh, thank the good Lord above. Finally, somebody is here to help." The man stepped fully into the hallway, his relief palpable. He was met with guarded expressions and no movement to lower weapons. "I'm sorry, man, but we're not a rescue team." "At least not for you," Damon said. The man's smile faltered, confusion replacing relief. "What are you talking about?" "There are people stuck in a suite on the 20th floor who are being overrun by those people," Brittany explained. "I'm so confused right now. Where did you come from, and how do you know someone is upstairs needing help?" "We were trapped in the coffee shop in the lobby. We didn't have food, so we were going to have to move at some point," Kyle said. "And when we heard their call for help, we decided to lend a hand," Sarah added. The man's brow furrowed. "They called you?" "Not exactly. They called a local DJ. We heard the call on the radio." Sarah pulled the radio from her belt, showing it to him. 95.1. "You should be able to get it on your radio. He's been sharing some good information about what's happening out there." The man's face fell. "Hopefully it's not as bad as what I'm seeing from my window." The group exchanged knowing looks, and Sarah shook her head slowly. "I don't know what you're seeing, but I'm pretty sure it's worse out there." The man went pale, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. "Oh man, This is a nightmare. It's a nightmare we're all in, but we'll get through it together, Damon said, his tone firm but reassuring. Kyle cleared his throat. Speaking of, I don't suppose you have a screwdriver or a knife in there, do you? Yeah, I got my pocket knife. The man reached into his jeans and pulled out a folding knife, tossing it to Kyle. Kyle caught it smoothly and flipped it open, examining the blade. It was a simple lockback design, the blade about 3 inches long and reasonably sturdy. Will that work? I'll make it work. The man stepped further into the hallway. What are you going to do? We're going to find the stairwell and head up to 20 and help those people. If you let me grab my shoes, I can help out. Kyle shook his head quickly. We got that under control, but there's something you can do for me. What is it? Watch after the ladies here. Sarah's head snapped toward Kyle, her eyes flashing. Oh, hell no. You're not leaving us behind. Kyle turned to face her, his voice soft but forceful. The stairwell is going to be close quarters fighting, and the more people in there, the harder it's going to be. Sarah wanted to argue. Every instinct told her to fight him on this, to insist on going, but she could see the logic in his words. The stairwell would be narrow, confined. Too many people would just get in each other's way. After a moment, she nodded reluctantly. Yeah, fine. Besides, I got a job for you. I want the 3 of you to start knocking on doors, figure out who is still alive on this floor. Get them all listening to that DJ so everybody is on the same page. Kyle pointed to Hiroshi, motioning for him to join them. The Japanese man understood immediately and moved to stand with the 2 men. You be careful up there, Sarah said. Kyle managed a slight smile. Oh, you know me. Yeah, that's why I said, be careful. The 2 of them shared a quick laugh, the moment of levity precious in the darkness surrounding them. Then the men snapped into business mode, their expressions hardening with determination. They turned and began marching down the hallway toward the stairwell door at the far end. Chapter 7. Kyle, Damon, and Hiroshi stopped by the stairwell door, pressing their ears against the cool metal. The sounds filtering through were muffled but unmistakable. Moaning on the landing beyond, the shuffle of dead feet on concrete. They couldn't tell how many or how far away, but the creatures were definitely there. Kyle pulled back from the door, gripping the knife tighter. Okay, I say we bust in there, crack some heads, and haul ass to the top floor. How much time do you need to get that door open? Kyle examined the knife blade again, mentally running through the process. 30 seconds at the most. Okay, my man here, and I will cover you while you jimmy it open. Damon looked over to Hiroshi and gave him a playful smack on the arm, the kind of gesture he'd share with an old friend. The Japanese man stiffened slightly, unsure how to respond to the casual physical contact. After a moment, he gave a serious nod, his face all business. I'm going to assume that you're going to follow my lead. Kyle glanced between them. I can get Brittany over here with her phone. Damon shook his head. We're good. He's been kicking more ass than any of us today, so I'm not going to doubt him now. Kyle nodded, accepting the logic. They'd all seen what Hiroshi could do with that makeshift spear. Language barrier or not, the man knew how to fight. Kyle turned to face the door, taking a deep breath. He held up 3 fingers, making eye contact with both men. 3, 2, 1. Kyle pushed the door open and darted into the stairwell. The smell hit him immediately. Decay and copper. The stench of death. To his left, 2 creatures stood at the edge of the stairs going down, their backs to him. They swayed slightly like they were listening to music only they could hear. Kyle didn't hesitate. He sprinted forward, stopping just short of them, and thrusted his leg forward. The front kick connected solidly with the closest zombie's lower back, sending it stumbling forward into its companion. Both creatures lost their footing, arms flailing as they bounced down the concrete stairs to the landing below. The sound of their bodies hitting each step echoed up the stairwell. As the crashing stopped, new sounds replaced it, moaning from above, excited footsteps from below, multiple sets getting closer. We have to move! Damon and Kyle took point, rushing up the stairs with Hiroshi close behind. The Japanese man kept glancing over his shoulder, tracking the sounds of pursuit. The footsteps from below were getting louder, maybe 2 flights down and climbing fast. They reached the 17th floor landing just as 3 zombies rounded the corner from above. The creatures saw them instantly. their moans turning to eager snarls as they charged down the stairs. One zombie pulled ahead of the other two, its torn clothes flapping as it ran. Damon reacted on pure instinct. He hurled his blender base like a discus, the heavy metal spinning through the air. It connected with the lead zombie's knee with a crack of breaking bone. The ghoul pitched forward, its momentum carrying it into a face-first collision with the stairs. The two zombies behind couldn't stop in time, tripping over their fallen companion and joining it in a tangle of limbs. Kyle moved in immediately, raising his weapon high and bringing it down repeatedly on exposed skulls. The confined space of the stairwell amplified every impact, every crack of bone. Blood splattered across the walls, the stairs, Kyle's arms. Rather than retrieve his weapon, Damon planted his foot on the back of one struggling ghoul, pinning it in place while Kyle finished it off. In seconds, all three were still. Damon rushed forward to grab his bloodied weapon as they continued up toward the 18th floor landing. A single zombie waited there, standing in the center of the landing like a sentry. Damon didn't slow down, using his momentum to drive the blender base through its skull in passing. Before they could continue upward, Hiroshi called out sharply in Japanese. The words were incomprehensible, but the fear in his voice was universal. Both men spun around. Hiroshi had fallen behind slightly, and a zombie had gotten dangerously close. He drove the tip of his spear through its eye socket, dropping it instantly, but another was right behind it. The second creature stumbled over the falling body, giving Hiroshi just enough time to deliver a forceful kick to its face. The zombie staggered back a couple of feet before recovering its balance. The brief respite let Hiroshi reset his stance. Standing 2 steps above the landing gave him the high ground advantage. He aimed carefully and drove the spear downward with both hands, the point punching through the top of the zombie's skull. As it crumpled to the concrete, the thundering of more footsteps echoed up from below. Many footsteps. "Go get that door open." Kyle didn't need to be told twice. He bounded up the stairs 2 at a time, his legs burning from the exertion. He kept his weapon ready, listening for any sounds from above, but heard nothing. After what felt like an eternity, he reached the 20th floor door. Relief washed over him when he saw the lock mechanism. It was nearly identical to the ones at that crappy motel in Texas. Same manufacturer, same basic design, same weaknesses. "Oh yeah, we're in business." Kyle dropped to one knee beside the door, flipping open the knife blade. He inserted it into the gap between the door and frame, feeling for the latch mechanism. The metal was cold against his fingers as he worked. Meanwhile, Damon and Hiroshi had retreated to the 19th floor landing, making their stand there. The stairwell below had become a river of zombies, at least 10 of them pushing upward. Damon swung his blender base in wide defensive arcs, trying to catch any zombie that got too close. Beside him, Hiroshi had reversed his spear, using the blunt end like a staff to shove the creatures back, trying to buy precious seconds. One of Damon's wild swings connected solidly, cracking a skull with enough force to send the zombie tumbling backward. It crashed into several others, creating a brief logjam on the stairs. But for everyone that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. "There's too many of them," Hiroshi grunted in response, muttering something sharp in Japanese. Without warning, he spun his spear around to the pointed end. But instead of going for a headshot, he picked a target in the middle of the pack. The spear drove through the zombie's soft stomach tissue, punching out through its back. Hiroshi let out a battle cry as he lifted the impaled zombie slightly, using it like a battering ram. He swept the spear from side to side, the thrashing zombie on the end knocking others back down the stairs. It was grotesque but effective, turning one enemy into a weapon against the others. The impaled zombie flailed wildly, its movements helping to clear space. Other creatures trying to climb the stairs were knocked back repeatedly by their thrashing companion. Hiroshi's arms shook from the strain, but he held firm. He glanced over his shoulder at Damon, speaking forcefully in rapid Japanese. The words were foreign, but the meaning was clear. "I don't have the foggiest idea of what you just said, but I'm guessing it's something along the lines of, 'Get the hell out of the way'?" Hiroshi continued to strain, using the impaled zombie to hold the line. The creature on his spear was clearly unhappy about its situation, its thrashing growing more violent. Damon took the hint and retreated up the final flight of stairs. He reached the top floor to find Kyle still working on the lock, muttering a steady stream of curses under his breath. The Texan's face was tight with concentration, sweat beading on his forehead. "Pretty sure it's been 30 seconds, man." Kyle didn't respond, couldn't respond. He was too focused on feeling for the last tumbler, that final click that would mean success. His fingers manipulated the knife blade with practiced precision, and then suddenly he felt it give. The lock popped open with a satisfying click. He grabbed the handle and pulled the door open. "We're calling it 30 seconds. Damon smirked despite the situation and let out a loud whistle that echoed down the stairwell. "Hiroshi, we're in!" Kyle and Damon rushed through the door. The big man held it open, looking back anxiously for their companion. The sounds of combat had stopped, replaced by running footsteps getting closer. "Come on, man, come on!" A moment later, Hiroshi burst into view, taking the stairs 3 at a time. He hit the landing at full speed and dove through the doorway. Right behind him, a handful of zombies crested the stairs, their dead eyes locked on their escaping prey. Damon pulled the door shut with all his strength, the heavy metal slamming home just as the first zombie reached it. The creatures crashed into the other side, their fists immediately beginning to pound against the barrier. The door shook with each impact, but the lock held firm. The 3 men stood there for a moment, hands on their knees, chests heaving as they fought to catch their breath. Sweat mixed with blood on their clothes and skin. They'd made it. They'd actually made it to the 20th floor. Their moment of relief was short-lived. From around the corner down the hallway came new sounds, moaning, banging, screaming. Kyle straightened up, wiping sweat from his eyes. "All right, let's finish this." Chapter 8. Kyle, Damon, and Hiroshi walked up the hallway softly, each footstep carefully placed to minimize noise. They didn't want to alert the horde on the next hallway until they were in position to deal with them. The carpet muffled their approach, but they still moved with exaggerated caution. As they reached the corner, Kyle pressed himself against the wall and slowly poked his head around. The hallway stretched 30 yards to a set of double doors at the far end. A dozen zombies were pressed against those doors, climbing over each other, pushing and clawing at the wood. They moaned in unison, a hungry chorus that echoed off the walls. The creatures were so focused on getting through that door, they hadn't noticed anything behind them. Kyle pulled back and turned to his companions. "There's a dozen of them, all trying to get into the door down there." "We've handled more than that today," Damon said, though his voice carried less confidence than his words. "Not out in the open, we haven't." Damon considered this for a moment, then brightened. "Maybe my guy Hiroshi here can use his magic barricade stick to hold them in place." He mimicked Hiroshi's elevator technique, holding his arms out like he was wielding the spear horizontally. The Japanese man watched the demonstration, then poked his own head around the corner to assess the situation. Upon seeing just how many zombies he was dealing with, he shook his head firmly. "Well, damn, so much for that." Hiroshi ignored Damon's disappointment. Instead, he looked down the hallway again, this time focusing on something else. An open door about halfway down caught his attention. Without warning, he darted across the hallway opening, moving so fast that Kyle and Damon barely had time to register what was happening. "Jesus Christ, man!" Damon immediately checked around the corner, his heart pounding. None of the zombies had turned. They remained fixated on the door, oblivious to Hiroshi's movement. He turned back to Kyle, shaking his head in relief and exasperation. "We're good, but we're gonna have a talk with that boy once we get Brittany's phone. Ain't that the truth?" The 2 men watched as Hiroshi approached the open room cautiously. He pressed himself against the wall beside the doorway, then quickly poked his head inside. After a moment, he turned back to them and gave a thumbs up before disappearing into the room. "Does he want us to follow him?" "I don't know. Let's give him a minute." They didn't have to wait long. Hiroshi emerged pushing a large cleaning cart, one of those industrial ones with multiple shelves and compartments. The wheels squeaked slightly as he rolled it down the hallway toward them. Both Damon and Kyle broke into grins as they realized his plan. "That man's a genius. Come on, let's get ready to fight, because as soon as he pushes that into place, we might have company." The 2 men moved into position at the corner as Hiroshi maneuvered the cart. He pushed it across the hallway opening, creating a makeshift barrier about chest high. The moment it scraped into place, one of the zombies at the far end noticed the movement and sound. Its head snapped around, dead eyes focusing on them. The creature let out an excited moan and broke away from the pack, sprinting toward them with inhuman speed. The trio stood their ground, waiting. When it got close enough, Hiroshi thrust his spear forward, catching it in the eye. The ghoul dropped instantly. Kyle let out a sharp whistle, the sound cutting through the hallway. The remaining zombies turned in unison, some stumbling over each other in their eagerness to pursue new prey. They charged down the hallway, a wave of gnashing teeth and grasping hands. Damon dropped to one knee, putting his shoulder against the cleaning cart and bracing it with his considerable weight. The first zombies slammed into the other side with tremendous force, but the cart held. More piled up behind them, creating a writhing mass of bodies trying to push through or climb over. Kyle and Hiroshi went to work with ruthless efficiency. Kyle's blender base rose and fell repeatedly, each strike accompanied by the crack of breaking bone. Beside him, Hiroshi thrust his spear with surgical precision, finding eyes, temples, the soft spots that led to the brain. The cart rocked with each impact, but Damon held firm, grunting with effort as he kept it in place. Blood splattered across the walls, the floor, their clothes. The zombies kept pushing forward mindlessly, making them easy targets. One would fall, and another would immediately take its place, climbing over the corpse to reach for them. It took several minutes of constant fighting before the last zombie fell. The hallway suddenly seemed too quiet, the absence of moaning almost unsettling. "Are we good?" Kyle surveyed the pile of corpses, watching for any movement. "Yeah, man, we're good." Damon got back to his feet, rolling his shoulder to work out the soreness. Kyle pushed the cart aside, and the trio looked down at the carnage they had created. Bodies lay stacked too deep in some places, dark blood pooling on the expensive carpet. They stepped over the corpses carefully, making sure none were still moving. Halfway down the hallway, they heard a door being pulled open. A middle-aged man stuck his head out cautiously. Then his face split into a huge smile when he spotted them. "Patty, get out here. Somebody heard us on the radio." A middle-aged blonde woman joined him in the hallway moments later. She clasped her hands together, tears of relief in her eyes. They stood in their doorway, smiling and waiting as the trio approached. "I'm Gary, and this is my wife, Patty." "Thank you so much. I don't know how we can repay you." Patty's voice trembled with emotion. "I'm Kyle, and this is Damon and Hiroshi." Hands were shaken all around, Gary pumping Kyle's hand enthusiastically, while Patty touched Damon's arm in gratitude. Hiroshi gave a polite bow, which the couple returned awkwardly but sincerely. "I don't suppose you have any water in there, do you?" "I'm parched," Damon said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Oh, sure, honey. Come on inside. We got water and food." "I wouldn't turn down a snack," Kyle added. The five of them walked into the penthouse suite, and Kyle let out a low whistle. The place was massive. A bedroom flanked each side of an enormous living area. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a breathtaking view of Las Vegas, the city lights beginning to twinkle as evening approached. From 20 floors up, it almost looked normal. The three men gravitated toward the windows, drawn by the view. The strip stretched out before them, the famous hotels and casinos standing tall. But as they looked down toward street level, they could see the truth. Dark shapes swarmed between the buildings, filling the streets and sidewalks. Even from this height, they could make out the jerky, unnatural movement of the zombies. "I know, fellas, it doesn't look good down there," Gary said quietly, joining them at the window. "Trust me, we know. We started this little escapade in the lobby." Gary's eyes widened. "My God, you fought your way up here from the lobby just to help us?" "Officially, yes. Unofficially, we ran out of food and figured the penthouse was as good a place as any to try and get to." Gary let out a hearty laugh, giving Damon a firm pat on the back. Meanwhile, Patty returned with a tray loaded with bottled water and pre-packaged snacks: crackers, nuts, some candy bars, small bags of chips. "I'm sorry it ain't a hot meal, boys, but I hope this is good." All three men looked at the modest spread as if it were a feast. After hours of fighting and running on adrenaline, even vending machine food looked incredible. They smiled and nodded gratefully as they dove in. "Thank you so much, ma'am." "Yes, thank you." Hiroshi said something in Japanese, his tone clearly grateful, though the words were incomprehensible. Patty looked confused for a moment. He says thanks, Damon translated, though he had no idea if that was accurate. Patty smiled and nodded, stepping back to give them room to eat. Well, boys, take a load off, have a seat, and enjoy the view. Thank you, Gary, we will. Kyle swallowed a mouthful of crackers before speaking. Hey, Gary, I don't suppose you still have your phone, do you? Well, yeah. Anybody in particular you want to talk to? Can you call up that DJ friend of yours? I'd like to talk to him. Well, absolutely, Kyle. Give me just a second. Gary pulled out his phone and dialed from memory. After a few rings, someone answered. Hey, Midnight Mike, Gary and Patty over here at the Desert Oasis. I just wanted to let you know that by putting me on the radio, somebody came up here and saved us. Gary paused, listening to the response, nodding along. Yeah, Mike, he'd like to talk to you too. Hang on. Gary walked over and handed the phone to Kyle. Hey, is this Midnight Mike? The one and only. Who do I have the pleasure of speaking to? The DJ's voice was smooth and professional, even given the circumstances. My name is Kyle, and I'm here with my friends Damon and Hiroshi. But, Mike, can I ask, are we on the air right now? Yes, sir. You are live and being broadcast to everyone in the greater Las Vegas area. Fantastic. I just want to let Sarah and Brittany know that we are all right. There's some friends of ours who helped us get up here. We left them a few floors behind for safety. Well, ladies, I'm sure you are proud as can be at what your men accomplished today, saving the lives of a couple of good folks like Gary and Patty. Mike, would you mind if I said something else? Go right ahead, Kyle. The floor is yours. I think you've earned it. To anybody listening who is currently at the Desert Oasis Casino, my name is Kyle, and we are currently in room... Kyle paused, looking over to Gary. 2018. Room 2018. If you have access to a phone, please call this room once I'm done talking. My friends and I managed to fight our way up 20 stories using blenders and a broomstick, and I think if we work together, we just might be able to secure this hotel. Before we can do that, however, we need to figure out who is here and where everybody is. There was a brief pause before Mike responded. You hear that, my people? The military may have abandoned us, but we are not helpless. In fact, that gives me a fantastic idea. Once I get back from my next music break to go get a few supplies, I'm going to be taking calls and see if I can't start connecting you survivors with one another. Kyle, are you still with me? Yeah, Mike, I'm here. Good. Thank you so much for the inspiration, and damn fine work, sir. Please call me back tomorrow and keep me up to date with how things are going. You got it, Mike. And for the people in the Desert Oasis, you can start calling our room now. Kyle ended the call and handed the phone back to Gary. Almost immediately, the room phone began ringing. Patty, dear, would you mind getting that? Patty hurried over to the room phone, answering with a bright, Hello, room 2018. She listened for a moment, then began speaking rapidly, her voice encouraging. Gary watched his wife for a moment, then turned back to Kyle. Do you really think we can take this place back? Yes, Gary, I do. And since it doesn't sound like anybody is coming to save us, if we don't save the day, who will? Gary nodded thoughtfully before joining his wife, who was gesturing for him to bring her a notepad to write on. She was already gathering information from whoever was on the other end. Damon looked over at Kyle with genuine confusion. A couple hours ago, you didn't want to leave the coffee shop, and now you want to take over an entire casino hotel? Kyle smirked and shrugged as he sat back in one of the plush chairs, gesturing at the panoramic view of the city. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in reds and oranges that almost masked the chaos below. A couple hours ago, I was in a windowless room. Now I'm sitting in the penthouse suite. If Vegas has taught me anything, it's that things can change just that quick. The end.